Hey guys, so today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to review the Canon PowerShot V1. I've had it pretty much since release and I've used it for this as a kind of vlog travel lens. I've also put it up against my more expensive cameras. So let's find out. Is the PowerShot V1 worth it? Is it better in terms of image quality over a phone? And does it keep up with more expensive cameras? Let's get into it. And we'll start with handling because this thing feels really, really well built. But at the same time, it's really light, it's perfect for travel at only 380 grams. And it's small enough to fit easily in just about any bag or even a big coat pocket, so it's really easy to carry around. But for me, what really stands out with this particular camera is the design and the ergonomics, because honestly, this feels like Canon at their best in terms of camera design. One of the main reasons I love Canon is definitely the ergonomics, and for a compact camera like this, I think they've absolutely nailed it here in the PowerShot because everything is exactly where you want it to be. For example, the power switch is easy to access from both the front and the back of the camera. It is really quick and easy with just one switch to switch between photo and video mode. And just about every key function you would want when shooting video is accessible quickly on the camera through a dedicated function button. And for a small camera like this, I think the grip is actually surprisingly good. I've got pretty big hands and I'd say that the PowerShot actually beats out the R50V in terms of having a more comfortable grip. So again, that's really impressive for this kind of compact, convenient camera. The screen is also surprisingly good for a lower cost camera like this, which is important because there's no EVF on the PowerShot. The camera's really lightweight, so it's perfect for vlogging and in general, just feels like the ideal travel camera for creators. The camera itself is really intuitive and just effortless to use, which makes it a really fun camera to take traveling to just capture what's going on around you. But at the end of the day, if the image quality doesn't hold up, then I'm just not going to use this camera. So we will get to that soon. As you can see, it also has a leaf shutter that closes automatically when you power off the camera. So you can just throw this in a bag and not worry about scratching that front element. So yeah, this camera is just always ready to go, even down to the built-in microphones, which Canon claimed were very good. And this was always going to be a deal breaker for me in terms of how much I'll actually use a camera like this. But I'm pleased to report that so far, I've had very good results from this, even in some tricky audio situations. So this is a sample of the built-in mic on the PowerShot V1. So no external mic at all. I've just got the dead cat on the camera and it is quite windy at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see if that helps. And I'll add a little bit of processing like I normally would, because with this camera, what I would love is if I don't have to worry about an external mic and I can just whip it out and get like vlog style casual stuff when I need to without having to set up a lav mic or anything like that. So yeah, interested to see how this camera sounds. So yeah, I'm genuinely impressed with the quality of the built-in mics on the PowerShot V1. And up until this camera, I've been using the DJI Pocket 3 for those kind of quick behind the scenes things. And to be fair, I've always found that this has actually surprisingly good built-in mics as well. So I'll give you a kind of side-by-side right now so you can hear the difference between these two cameras for yourself. So I am in the middle of a square in Venice and it is very loud and very busy. So what I want to do is test the audio, the built-in mics on both of these cameras. I'm holding both the Pocket 3 and the PowerShot V1 at the same kind of distance that you would for vlogging. So I look a bit stupid, but I'm going to swap audio between each camera so that you can hear what it sounds like with a little bit of processing like I would normally do to say a lav mic. So I'm interested to see if there's a difference in quality between the two built-in mics. And yeah, to me, side by side, they're both good, but the Canon clearly has the edge. I think the built-in mics are just a bit cleaner and a bit more full as well. Another step up is the zoom range, because the zoom range on this thing is honestly, I think, perfect for travel. It gives you a full frame equivalent of 16mm to 50mm. So I'm here at the beautiful Lake Carezza, and this is just a great example of how wide the lens is on the PowerShot V1. So it's great for vlogging like this and still getting all of the environment in the shot, but then you can just turn the camera around and the zoom range is super useful as well for punching in on details. I found the zoom range really useful, and not just for vlogging, but also all kinds of behind the scenes stuff. I regularly throw this on a tripod to capture the behind the scenes of a photo shoot, and I've even captured some POV footage with this thing, so it really is, as a content creator, a very useful tool to have around. What I also like is the 50mm The footage starts to lose that typical kind of action camera small sensor look that you get with a lot of other compact or convenient travel-friendly cameras, and gives you more of a natural field of view with a little bit more depth to the image as well. It does have a variable aperture though, unfortunately. It starts at f2.8 at the wide end and then closes down to f4.5 on the long end, so you do lose a bit of light when you zoom in. But what about image quality? Because at the end of the day, this can be the most convenient, fun camera in the world, but if the footage doesn't hold up, then I'm just not going to use it. So let me show you what this thing can capture. The PowerShot V1 shoots 4K 10-bit footage from its 1.4-inch 22 megapixel CMOS sensor. All the clips you're seeing right now were shot in C-Log 3, and honestly, I was really impressed with what this little camera can produce. The colors are natural and vibrant and not oversaturated like a lot of other kind of convenient action cameras. Skin tones still look great, and the dynamic range as well is actually surprisingly solid. You can pull back a lot in the highlights and the shadows without things falling apart quickly. I will say the footage is very sharp. It's a bit too sharp and video-y looking, if that makes sense in my opinion, so I'm generally dialing back the sharpness in post a little bit. Also, don't get me wrong, you really do have to expose this camera properly. I found that it benefits from being slightly overexposed, especially when you're shooting in C-Log 3 anyway, but once you do get the exposure right, I have yet to run into a kind of dynamic range situation that this camera hasn't been able to handle. So if you are using this camera in any way seriously, I'd highly recommend sticking with C-Log 3 because it is so easy to grade anyway, and it just gives you so much more flexibility and just a much better looking image overall in my opinion. But see for yourself, here is a quick side-by-side up against my DJI Pocket 3. You let me know which one you think looks better. And just for fun now, let's see how it compares to my R6 Mark II, a full frame camera using a 24-105 f4 lens. And obviously the PowerShot V1 isn't ever going to match up to the R6, but I would say it does look pretty good next to the R6. And in some scenarios, I could see you being able to mix and match the footage from these two cameras if you really wanted to, because the colors in particular match up pretty well. Before we continue, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, and as a photographer, having a website that showcases your work is a must in my opinion, and Squarespace just makes it so easy to get started. You don't need any coding or design skills. Everything you're going to want to do is as simple as drag and drop. And Squarespace even have amazing AI tools now like Design Intelligence or Blueprint AI, which can all help you create a personalized website in just a few easy steps. And of course, the fully customizable photo galleries are just perfect for showing off your portfolio to potential clients. Squarespace also has fantastic e-commerce tools that make setting up an online store an absolute breeze, so you can start selling in no time, and you can also handle many different types of payments seamlessly thanks to Squarespace Payments. So if you're ready to get started, head on over to squarespace.com/JamesReader and use code JamesReader for 10% off your first domain or website. What I did find though is that the autofocus is generally great. It's fast, reliable, you don't have to mess around with it, and it's clearly tuned to prioritize locking onto people, as you'd expect, and it rarely lets you down in my experience. For a small camera like this as well, the battery seems really good. I could go as long as 2 days without having to worry about charging this when traveling. That's mostly just capturing short clips and then making sure I turned it on and off in between. But even for longer form stuff, so capturing behind the scenes of photo shoots, where I'm capturing 45-minute long clips in 4K, the battery just holds up really, really well. And it also just doesn't seem to overheat, which makes sense because it has a built-in fan, so you don't have to worry about recording long-form stuff with this either. Low light performance also seems pretty good as well, much better than I expected, considering that this is a smaller sensor camera. It has handled some pretty dark scenarios reasonably well. There's going to be noise, of course, but I think it's totally usable and way better than most compact or action-style cameras that I've used anyway. And the autofocus also manages fine in darker situations too. Now the PowerShot V1 does not have IBIS, so there is no in-body stabilization at all, and it relies entirely on the optical IS built into the lens. And for me, This is one of the bigger trade-offs that you're going to have to accept with this camera, I think. Don't get me wrong, it is far from unusable by any means, but it's definitely not as smooth as something like the DJI Pocket, of course, or even a smartphone with their kind of advanced digital stabilization. So for vlogging, here's what it looks like in the real world in a handheld scenario. So here's a quick test of the stabilization for a kind of vlogging situation. So I'm just holding the camera at arm's length and just walking normally. I'm not really trying to keep the camera particularly steady. And this is with just the optical stabilization, just from the lens. So now I have digital stabilization on, so I'm interested to see if the footage is a bit smoother. But what I do worry about with digital stabilization is if it introduces the kind of wobbling and warping in the corners. So be interesting to see, looking back, if that's an issue. So yeah, I always stick to just the basic optical stabilization and leave the digital stabilization off. It's not the most stable, but at least you avoid those weird warping artifacts in the edges of the frame that you often get with digital IS. But overall, the stabilization is pretty good, and it improves massively with just very light digital stabilization in post. And I found that you'll get better results from doing that than you will ever using the built-in digital IS with any of my cameras, to be honest. But yeah, it is never going to be a match for my action cameras when it comes to that super smooth, floaty look. So cameras like the Action 5, the Insta360 Go. So that's the trade-off, I think. So you're getting better image quality here with the PowerShot V1, no doubt in my opinion, but you are sacrificing some of that buttery, smooth, gimbal-like stabilization. So I'll show this side by side now, up against the Pocket 3. The PowerShot is just never going to have that floaty feel. That's just part of the deal unless you're willing to put it on a gimbal. I've also mostly been running this camera in auto exposure, specifically in aperture priority mode, because again, I just want to be able to pull this camera out and shoot things quickly without having to fiddle around with settings. I've seen a couple of reviews really criticize the auto exposure on this camera, but I've honestly had nothing but pretty good natural results in terms of its auto exposure. Even when moving from really dark to bright scenes, I found that the exposure adjusts quickly. It's not jarring, and it's still responsive enough to keep things looking smooth in my opinion. Some have suggested that the built-in ND filter automatically turning on and off is what causes the delay in auto exposure, but I tested this on my balcony, going from a dark area to a full bright sunlight situation with that auto ND filter enabled, and even then, I think it handles the shift pretty well, at least in my opinion. I also tend to crank the exposure compensation up by about 2 stops, just to slightly overexpose the footage. And when doing that, one issue I did notice with the auto exposure in general is that sometimes it holds the ISO and shutter speed unnecessarily high in my opinion. There was a couple of situations where I could see that the camera could have easily dropped the ISO by a stop and brought the shutter speed down to 1/50, which would obviously be ideal. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to do that. So yeah, as I mentioned, the PowerShot also has a built-in ND filter with a fixed strength of 4 stops, so it can either be turned on and off. There's no variable settings to it or anything like that. And it is definitely very nice to have in a small camera like this, and it does help take the edge off that overly sharp, no motion blur look that you often get with compact cameras or with your phone, for example. But to be honest, 4 stops usually isn't enough on bright sunny days when you're traveling. So if you're trying to stick with say 1/60 shutter speed for natural motion blur, you're still going to struggle, I think, but it still does help if you're going for more of a cinematic feel on the go. I don't think Canon really expected people to use this camera for stills, but I did a little bit, just out of curiosity really, and honestly, I thought that the straight out of camera JPEGs looked pretty good, and the RAW files have a decent amount of flexibility, so in a pinch, or if you just want to use this camera for fun, I think you might really like the images you'll get from this. I think it's going to beat out most phones, especially when you factor in the zoom range, which is a really, really useful zoom range for photography as well. So this camera is not perfect, and there are a couple of trade-offs that come with the kind of convenience that it offers. And the first one is obviously the fact that it has a fixed lens. So you can change it out, so you're locked into the focal range that it offers, and also the max aperture that it offers. But obviously 16 to 50 is a range that's going to suit most people, I think, for the kind of things that this is intended to shoot. so I don't think it's too bad. Then there's the lack of IBIS, which could certainly be a limitation for some. But honestly, personally for me, with a lens that goes as wide as 16mm, I'm kind of glad that they left it out because I'd rather have that clean optical stabilization and just add a bit of stabilization in post when I need to, instead of having to deal with those really hard to remove over the top corner wobbles that you tend to get from IBIS. So obviously the ideal situation would have been that Canon came up with some kind of improved, refined IBIS in here where we wouldn't have to worry about that, but unfortunately that's not the case. Another limitation, as far as I'm aware anyway, is that I don't think that there's any way that you can use any kind of external filter on this camera. So that means that you can't add on a mist filter or any extra ND filters like a variable ND if you wanted to, so you're stuck with that built-in ND. So that will definitely limit your creative control in certain bright outdoor situations. You're also not going to get the most subject separation or background blur from this camera. Even when you zoom out all the way to 50, where you typically expect to get a little bit more depth when you've got a subject in frame, well then the aperture closes down quite a bit. So a kind of nice creamy background look is a lot harder to achieve on this camera. So overall, I am really happy with this PowerShot V1. I think for its intended purpose, it performs really well and it is a big step up over my phone. And honestly, I think a step up over the DJI Pocket 3 or any of my other kind of small, convenient cameras. But let me know what you think about that. If you want to see a full, in-depth comparison between those two cameras, this and the Pocket, let me know because I've pretty much got it ready to go. I'm just not sure how interested people will really be. So if you do want to see that, drop a comment down below and I'll put it together. For me, this comes really close to being the perfect travel video camera. It complements my Canon setup beautifully, in my opinion. It is super convenient to use and it is really well thought out as well. It's just a great tool for vlogging and content creation in general. I just wish it had slightly better stabilization. That's probably the only thing that's really holding this back from being the perfect video camera for me. But let me know what you guys think of the PowerShot V1. Hopefully this video was helpful. If you've got any questions about this camera, leave them down below. But that's it. That's it from me. I'll see you all next time.